I've walked through fire with shadows on my heels. Scars turned to stories that taught me to feel. Lost in the silence, found in the flame. Now wear my battle cry without shame. This isn't the end, it's where I begin. A soul that remembers the fire within.
Welcome back to another episode of A Warrior Spirit, brought to you by Praxis 33. I'm your host, Errol Snow. Let's dive in. Have you ever been so passionate about something that you wouldn't take no for an answer? Been so determined that when there was no door, you built your own? I believe that when life presents you with a problem or an obstacle, then there must be a solution if you look hard enough or stick with it long enough, and if you never give up on yourself or your goals. My guest today is someone who embodies this philosophy. Vincent Pugliese is a father and a husband. He's a former wedding photographer, pro sports photographer, life coach, author, and someone whose determination to live life on his own terms is something I truly respect. Vincent, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate all you do. I mentioned in your bio, you're a sports photographer, you're wedding photographer, coach. Obviously, you didn't start off that way. Where'd you start your journey? New York, right?
Yeah. I ended all that about 8 years ago. So I haven't shot professionally for about 8 years now, but that was the cornerstone of everything we've built in terms of everything building forward. But yeah, grew up in New York and it was built really from desperation and kind of failure. Like I think happens to a lot of people. I was terrible in school. Never got good grades, never cared. Went through 5 different majors in college, community college, dropped out of all of them. And
you didn't like school, but you went to college?
that was the thing, in that age, like that's what you do. You go, you're that's I didn't like high school, that's for sure. I liked the social aspect of school. I love the social aspect of college. But I went to, because what else? We came from a hardworking family. I had multiple jobs, but I still was able to go, and that was community college. It wasn't some prestigious university, but you can kind of pop in and out and work. But I went through multiple majors on it. Never could find a path, and I think a lot of people deal with that. I talk to, even in the work that I do today. They're trying, but they can't put their finger on it. And then, literally one night, like I was a sports fan. I was always a sports fan as a kid, and sometimes too much so. I cared too much. I cared more about sports and music than I did about my own life. And it was, and I was 22 years old, and I literally had a nightmare that like what am I doing with my life? I literally woke up middle of the night, and I moved back in with my parents at that point, and went downstairs 2:00 in the morning, and I saw my dad, who came down for water, and I said, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. Like I've never questioned myself before. I just kind of blindly did stuff. And he very succinctly, without even much emotion, said, he goes, you love sports, you love taking pictures, you love traveling. Why don't you become a sports photographer? It was that quick. And I never even knew that was a job. I didn't even know that was a career. Like nobody in school told me that was a thing. If they would have told me that when I was 16, I would have actually tried. Like you could actually be on the field with your favorite athletes, taking pictures of them and making money. I would have been the best student ever.
Yeah. Who wouldn't want that? But prior to that, growing up, obviously in an Italian family in New York, were you surrounded by the big, family like you see, the stereotypical family gatherings?
I think a lot of that's like a lot of that's true, but a lot of it's movies. Like, a lot of my friends, like there's some of it, but not. We didn't have a huge family. It was me and my brother, and but grandparents, very, very like you'd see in the movies. My parents were more, more Americanized, as they came here. But there are a lot of those aspects to it, but not like it wasn't The Sopranos. I'll tell you that it wasn't that.
My wife's Portuguese, so she grew up in Boston, so there was a huge communal aspect to that family. Kind of what I would picture.
I think we missed the generation. I think my grandparents, they came over. My grandparents, my dad's side were in Queens, New York, and I think they had a lot of that. but as it society evolves, sometimes it all stays together. We moved out to Long Island, a little bit farther away from our grandparents, not very far, but far enough that we would see each other we had the Italian meal every Sunday, 3 o'clock, and the big huge thing, like, and we had all that, but it wasn't like like, at least in my opinion, it wasn't like the movies. But I will say, my friends that came over, I think they saw it more than I did. I guess the
Yeah.
best way I could put it.
When you were growing up, I know, because we've been friends for a little while, I know a little bit of some of your backstory. But in your first book, I mentioned you're an author. In your book, you talked about sneaking into the stadium or getting someone who got you in. Can you tell that
Yeah.
story? Because I think it's pretty profound to what set your life up.
It was. I was 14 or 15 years old. I always was a New York Mets fan, and even from a little kid, they were terrible, but I loved them. Right? It was like it was my escape in some ways, right? And it was but then they finally got good, and then they went on in 1986. They won the World Series, and one of the most fun years. Like, as a 14-year-old, to one of the most fun baseball teams. They still talk about them, and they win the World Series, and I wanted to go to the parade, but my mom wouldn't let me. And I remember I was at the payphone at school, like, come on. And she's like, you're not going into New York City by yourself with a million crazy people. And it's like, she made it sound so unreasonable. It sounded fun to me. But nobody else was going. So then the next year was opening day. And I'm like, this is the last bit of that season. They're going to raise the banners and get the rings, and I got to go. So now I'm 15. And I bugged my parents, and they wouldn't let me go. And they both worked, so they couldn't take me. And finally, my mom said to me, she goes, well, if you can find somebody to go with, you can go. Because I had to cut school because it was a day game. And I got my friend Scott to go with me. And then the day of the game comes, and my parents go to work, and I'm home, and I go to Scott's house and find out that his mom changed her mind. He wasn't allowed to go. And I'm like, so I go back to my house, and I'm on the lawn, and I've heard the phrase, it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. I've heard it before,
Yeah.
but I never had a chance to use it. So I sat there, and I was like, I could either go home and watch the game on TV, I can go back to school, or I could go to Queens and see if I can get to the game. So I got on the bus, and I only had like $30 or $40 and for everything. And I get on the bus, and there's nobody on the bus. And then we get into Queens, and there's a second bus. And when I walk on the bus, there's nobody on it except this big, giant Italian guy, like, dressed all in black, chains, like, kind of out of the movies. Him and the bus driver and me. And I go to the back of the bus because I'm a little bit scared. And a couple minutes into the ride, he looks at me and he goes, hey, shouldn't you be in school? Because it was like 11 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. And I'm like, well, I'm going to the Mets game, and I'm all shy and timid. And he's like, by yourself you're going? Did you even have a ticket? And I was like, yeah, I'm going by myself. I don't have a ticket. I'm going to get one at the game. And he's like, now he's getting, it's like humor to him now. He's like, kid, this game's been sold out for months. It's the hottest ticket in town. It's like, how much money you got? So now I feel like I'm being like, is he going to rob me? It's like, he's asking how much money. And I was like, I got $30. And he laughs at me. He's like, to the bus driver, you believe this kid? $30. And he just kind of ignored me. I'm like, thank God. Like, he's not bugging me anymore. And so I go to get off the bus. I'm walking off, and I try to quickly go past him because I'm scared of him. And he goes, hey, kid. He stops me one more time. He goes, come here. And like, come up the stairs. And I was like, what? And he goes, all right, when you get to Shea Stadium, he goes, you go to gate B. You ask for Vito Lateruli, and you tell him that Funzy from the Waterfront sent you. And I was like, trying to remember what he said. He goes, you got that? I'm like, yeah, I got it. And I get off the way. He goes, now go. So I got the bus. Now I have to get on one more train to get to Shea Stadium. So the whole time in the train, I'm like, I'm never going to do that. But I kept replaying his name over and over again. Vito Lateruli, Funzy, Gate B. So when I get to Shea Stadium, I realize the place is packed. Nobody's selling tickets. And $30 is not going to get me a ticket. It's everybody's looking for tickets. So I'm like, either I go home or I go to gate B. So I go to gate B. I'm like, let me just see. And I asked the security guard. I said, hey, is Vito Lateruli here? And I'm scared. And he said, well, who's asking? He yells at me. I said, well, I'm pointing to nobody. I'm like, Funzy from the Waterfront sent me. And I was so nervous. I was looking down, and I see his hand, and I see him open the gate, this metal gate, and he goes, come on in. And I'm like thinking I'm in trouble, but I'm like, why would he let me in if I'm in trouble? So he lets me in, and then he goes, wait here. He gets on the radio, and some nice lady comes down with a clipboard. Come with me. She brings me up. She goes, you hungry? I'm like, sure. She gets me hot dog and soda and popcorn. You want a program? Sure. She goes over and gets me a program. And then she leads me along the concourse, down the stairs. I could see the field. I'm like, this isn't real. Walk all the way down to like the front row of the load section right behind home plate. And she pulls down a seat. She goes, have a great time. Let me know if you need anything. And I sat there, and within a half an hour, the Mets get introduced. They raise the World Series banner. They give the World Series rings. I'm so close you could see the diamonds. Darryl Strawberry hit a home run in the first inning, my favorite player. They win 3-2 versus the Pirates. And I went home. I was the happiest kid in the world. And the funny thing is, I get home, and my parents had no idea what's going on. They haven't, because this is before cell phones. So they're cooking dinner, cooking pasta, good Italian family. And I sit down and tell them the whole story. And I'm like, telling about Funzy and Vito and the home run, this, that. And my dad says, where were they from? Where was he from? I go, the waterfront. And I didn't know what that meant at that time. Like, it was the new Disney World. They make dreams come true. And my dad knew what it was. And so then I realized at that moment, I got to tell Scott what happened. So I get up from dinner. I run across the street. I knock on the door. I show him the program. I tell him what happened. He's screaming at his mother because he couldn't go. I come running back home, and I hear my parents talking and whispering, and they didn't know I came back home. And that's when I knew. My dad goes, he's got no idea that the mafia got him into that game. And at that moment on, it like ruined me for school, because I was like, when I'm in school that I hate, there's stuff like this going on, right? But the major point about that story for me was it made me realize, and it came to the topic of my second book, The Wealth of Connection, that Funzy in 10 minutes taught me more about business and relationships and networking than I ever learned in school or college. He opened doors that he didn't have to open. He made introductions that he didn't have to do. He asked questions that he didn't have to ask. And he used those things to open up a door for me that he never even knew happened. His bus left. I've never seen Funzy since then. On the way back from Shea that day, I was looking for him on the bus because I wanted to tell him what happened. He wasn't there. He might have died the next day. Who knows, right? He might still be alive, old man. I'm still telling his story because he did all the things that we all should be doing on a daily basis in 10 minutes, when people will spend a lifetime with somebody and never do any of those things. So that his story is like, he's like, mythical in my opinion.
Well, that's why I said, you have to be so determined that if there isn't a door, you build one. And I think you've exemplified that throughout a lot of your life. I mean, this isn't the only example that you have of not being able to be someplace where you just made yourself there and then some great things happen for it,
Yeah.
you know? So that's important. But you've lived. If someone were to look at your life now, they'd say, pretty successful guy. They would never know that you hated school and that you didn't do well. But you lived some pretty lean years. Like when you first met your wife,
Yeah.
I mentioned in the opening, you're a father and husband first, and you put that forward first.
Yeah.
But if and like, how did you meet Elizabeth?
We met in college. So
That's where you had the fun.
yeah. And so I was no, well, I went to community college in New York first. And that's when the photography thing opened up. So then I freelanced around New York for a couple of years. And then my editor at Newsday said, you really want to go back to school, get a degree in journalism, really hone your skills and your knowledge on this. I went to Ohio University. I was already 26 at that point. And that's where we met within, I think, the second semester there. And we were together ever since. And so we met, and then we graduated college and got jobs at a newspaper together, like right out of college. So that's how that all began.
But you were still doing some pretty humble beginnings. Like you didn't, even though you were, professional sports photographer
Yeah.
and all that, you weren't like what would be considered high on the hog. You had some
No.
pretty
Lean.
fine, lean years, right?
Oh, 100%. Like even the newspaper job, which was a dream job, because I got to do everything. Like the president came to town, I covered it. Any big events happened, I got to cover it. But it still paid $15 an hour in 2000, right? I won International Sports Photographer of the Year, and I was still getting paid. And the hard part was, and this is where we came into entrepreneurship, was I was winning all these awards. So was Elizabeth. And we're gonna have to start a family. We get married, she gets pregnant, we're gonna have a baby. And I went to my boss, and this really changed my life. It was, I'm like, okay, this is where I'm gonna get the big raise. I'm making $32,000 a year, baby, and the awards. This is where I get my bump up. This is where I get my 10% that everybody told me it was gonna be, which to me, I would have been so thrilled with, which is nothing when I look back on it. I go into the office, and my boss praises everything that I did and all the awards. And then he kind of rubs his eyes and he goes, but I can only give you 3%. Now my wife wants to stay home with the baby. She wants to leave the job. I'm making 32,000. 3% is nothing. So I said to her, I've never been belligerent, but I was like, 3% of nothing's nothing. It might be something of your salary. And in that moment, I realized the dream career that I've been working for 10 years I can't keep doing this. I have to leave. And I remember being in the door frame of his office and being like, it's over. I don't know what that means, but this is not. So I went home and I called my dad, who we had a rocky relationship with, and he had his own business, and I had worked for him before. And I called just to see if I could do a little side work. Now I'm in Indiana. He's in New York. I thought maybe we could do something, and he turned me down. It's not even my dad's turning me down. Like, this is the worst day ever. Like, I'm rejected all around. And he said something that changed my life. He said, listen, I've been trying to tell you this. You haven't listened. Maybe you will now. He goes, you have a skill, but you're not using it correctly. And now I'm curious. I'm like, well, what do you mean? He goes, you weren't a good photographer. You started out. You've become a really good photographer. And you have the option to do whatever you want. You can shoot corporate. You could shoot sports, weddings, commercial work. You can teach. You can do anything you want. And you're settling for $32,000 a year in benefits. Now, when you hear your dad tell you you're settling, usually it's the other way around, right? He's, just be happy with what you got. He's like, you're settling. So I went and I picked up the phone book. If you remember that, I started calling different photographers and seeing if I could work with them in their business, doing weddings and stuff like that. And they all turned me down. And I took the phone book and I threw it against the wall. And I said, they say, if you can't beat them, join them. I said, well, if we can't join them, we're going to beat them. And I called my wife and I said, we're starting a business. And she's 8 months pregnant. Not the best thing you want to say to your wife that's 8 months pregnant. And she was like, what do you mean? I said, we're going to start doing weddings. We're going to start. And literally all of a sudden had a vision and a goal, and built the business on the side for 2 years, nights and weekends, nonstop. While I did the job, she left the job. And within 2.5 years, we had paid off our house, became completely debt free, and quit our jobs and had
Within
freedom.
2 years of
Two
being
and a
turned down
no,
by
2.5
everybody.
years. Yeah.
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 Yeah, that's why I say
And
you embody building your own door. Like, you don't take no for an answer if you know that there's a way through it.
well, even to now, even in terms of the work that I do now, like, I'll make offers every single day for different things that we do. The amount of times people are like, let me think about it, maybe this and that. Like, to me, I'm not pushy at all. I'm consistent. But if you tell me maybe, I'm gonna ask you again. Right? Like, when you tell me no, like, if you don't mean it, say no. And
Yeah.
I'm not offended by it. But so many people just, oh, okay, him and her, like, no, make an offer. Like, wait, it's like the old book, Go for No.
Do
Just
you
collect
think
them.
do you think sorry to interrupt you, but do you
Yeah,
think that your experience on the bus that day going to Shea really honed in your connecting skills that you might not have otherwise developed had that not happened to you? Or were you
everything.
already pretty good by then?
No, I don't think I was. I think every experience, one of these experiences in life, they shape who you are. And I would have thought, what if I would have stayed home and watched the game on TV? What if I would have went to school? I would have missed out on one of the best experiences of my life. I always thought about that. For 10 or 15 years, I'm like, when you want to go ask the girl out, should you go back to your table and wonder what if, or should you do it? When you want to make the business, when you want to make the sale, when you want to make the friendship, are you going to do the work? And I can see what life would have been like without it. I would have went to school on a Tuesday afternoon. I wouldn't have even known that was an option, and I would have never seen. So I think, what am I missing out on if I don't do this? And so we envisioned this life of freedom. We envisioned traveling the country. We envisioned living somewhere that we dreamed of. And I know it's almost like Back to the Future, erased from existence,
Hmm.
right? That's that picture that starts fading. If you don't do the stuff, your future is erased from it doesn't happen. So having that experience and that blessing of having that day and knowing if I wouldn't have went on the bus, if I wouldn't have asked, if I wouldn't have listened to him even and followed his guidance, that there was an entire life-changing experience right there that I never would have seen. And I always keep that in my mind. And that's why I'm always sad when I see people like, yeah, I'm afraid of getting rejected. I'm afraid of being told no. What if it doesn't work? And it's like you'll never ever know. And then when you help people do that, because that's the world that I'm in now, and then they light up when it works for them, and they realize they didn't get shot in the head from asking for something and hearing no. And then when you ask for something, you hear no, you actually learn how to make a better offer. It's like there's no downside to it, but most people stay in fear of that almost their entire lives.
Yeah, my dad used to say, "What's the worst that's going to do? They're going to take you out back and shoot you. If
Yeah,
not, then just go for it." And he
yeah.
always gave me that encouragement. One of the greatest gifts my dad ever gave me. He was a blue collar worker like your family, hardworking individual. And when I was, I don't know, 19, 20, something like that, I had an opportunity to move to Florida, where you're currently at.
Mhm.
And I grew up in a really small town, 7,000 people. I was really afraid to leave, home to go to a bigger city like that. And my dad said, "Go make your life wherever it takes you. Home will always be here.
Mm.
And if you ever need, we're just a phone call away. And if you ever truly need, we're just a flight back. So never be afraid to go live your life." And that
That's
was
awesome.
one of the greatest gifts that my father ever gave me, the ability to just not be afraid to go live my life. So I can see how that would, help you. I'm going to bring up a couple of things here for you. I want to have you talk about these for a little bit. This was your second book, The Wealth of Connection.
Yes. Mhm.
I love on the cover you say non-best-selling author.
I'm the only one.
What what prompted the writing of this book? And this is something I think you do really, really well connecting.
Thank you. Everything that I think I've ever done, whether the membership or the live events or the books or the coaching, it all comes from an idea that wouldn't go away. My first book, Freelance to Freedom, was an idea that, for years I thought about writing, and I started writing and then I talked myself out of it, and it kept coming back. And I know if I try something and it keeps coming back, then I almost get a resolve to it that, like, okay, it's an idea that won't go away. And the Wealth of Connection was another one of those. Like, to me, this is the cornerstone of business and life and relationships is the connection side of it. And I think a large group of people blow it off. They blow it off for, oh, there's nothing in it for me right now. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna value this. They don't even realize that they do it. They put lip service to connection. Where to me, everything, even in business, like we're not good at a lot of things. Like we don't run ads and we don't have split test, all these technical things that so many people are always talking about. We've always just been really good at connection, and everything's always worked. We've always had relationships. We've always reached out to people. We've always been able to build community around it, and with that came the idea of, my goodness, like, we've built a complete life of time, money, location, freedom, multiple income streams in all these different ways, and there's no real overhead with it because it's all built around relationships and there's not complexity to it. So just trying to teach people that there's a simpler way of doing it that can lead to a really valuable lifestyle of those things that people generally want, and allowed us to just pick up and move to a dream home that we wanted in a dream location. And it wasn't, I don't want to say it was easy, because it wasn't easy, but it wasn't complicated. It was all based around the concepts of this book. That's why I wrote it.
I think the art of connecting is lost in today's technological world. People are just always trying to sell, sell, sell instead of connect, connect, connect. And I think
Yeah.
that's, again, something that you do really well. I have been in sales for 40 plus years, and I've learned really early on that nobody wants to be sold to, but everyone wants to buy. if you just
Yeah.
give them the opportunity, and you have to give them that opportunity, but by how you connect with them, and that kind of
It's
leads me into this next thing that you got going on, Total Life Freedom. This is a membership program where you're teaching people how to build the life they want, right?
Yeah, and that's where it came from. It came from just the idea of what are people. This is the whole thing with business. I think so many people miss out on, like, it really is kind of simple. What problem are you solving? What problem are you solving, and how can you solve it? Right. So for me, we had built a life that I would get people that would say to me, like, how'd you do that? And everybody's got something like that. It could be, like somebody in our group, like Mark Foster with storytelling, or different things that people are really good at or people are passionate about. When you can find something that you're interested in and something that people need help with, well, all you got to do at that point is really become obsessive about solving those problems. So that's what I do. I obsess about solving the problems of people that want that freedom in their lives. We've recently, we've rebranded that towards membership freedom, where people are looking for recurring revenue. That's the thing that we like. Wait a second, how do we get this freedom? Like, you have to dissect it. And I'm like, it didn't just happen, and we're not, I don't think, just lucky. But I'm lucky I didn't get hit by a bus. But like, we've really worked hard on figuring this out. What I realized is the reason why I have freedom, and the reason why I have, I could spend the time with my kids, and we homeschool and we travel, is because we have recurring revenue. And this was not taught to me in school. What was taught to you in school is get a job. And then what's taught to you in the business world is get business or get clients. But when you get caught up in the client trap of, now your client work is expanding, and now you kind of built yourself a job. So your client work is expanding. The only way to make more money is to get more clients. Well, that doesn't sound like freedom to me, right? When it requires your time. And then I would get in certain memberships. I'm like, my goodness, like, they got 1,000 people at $20 a month. Okay, that feels significant when they have to get on a call once a week and then build their community. So I started going down the path of recurring revenue and memberships. And once we realized that, like, that's the path, and then multiple income streams around that, that's where my next book is coming from. That's where the freedom comes from. And now with our kids, 19, 17, and 13, I can sit back as we're going towards that empty nest stage, or, whatever you call it. Like, man, I had the time with them. We didn't waste it. We didn't blow it. And that's kind of what, not kind of, that's what we love helping other people do. And you can't do that if you don't have financial freedom in some ways in your life.
And what's great about the businesses that you've done throughout your life, as people grow to know you, you're not afraid to pivot off of it, even if it's been something you've been doing for a long period of time. Some
Yeah.
people get so hung up on the fact that, oh, I put so much time and effort and money in this, I just can't change course. You're
Yep.
willing to change course, which brings me to this next thing, the two unconferences, which
Yes.
is, explain the meaning of this, because it is so fascinating and totally necessary, because it's what everybody who goes to a conference complains about.
Yeah. So we would do retreats for our membership and for our mastermind, and they were paid retreats. Sometimes they'd be at our house, but often they were around the country. We went coast to coast with these retreats, and generally they're 15 to 25 people. But I had an idea, because I kept going to these conferences, and I'm like, I keep spending good money, and I want to keep coming, but it keeps making me angry, because we would hang out in the hallways and make all these amazing connections. And that's where all my friendships would come from, and business collaborations, and getting asked to be on podcasts, all this type of stuff. But yet the entire event is built around, okay, leave the hallways and go to see all these different speakers. And then I feel like I was back in school. I never liked school. So now I'm going to this event 2.5 days, and it's speaker after speaker after speaker. And one's telling you to start a podcast, the other one's saying, no, don't do a podcast, do an email list. And one's saying YouTube's the way. So you leave more confused than you start. And yet all these amazing people that you can connect with are in different settings, and you never really meet them, except when you go to the networking thing at 10:30 at night, where there's a DJ playing incredibly loud music and you can't hear each other. And I'm like, who thought of this stupid idea in terms of this is how events should be? So we came up with the idea, like, well, an unconference for entrepreneurs would be the opposite of all this stuff, kind of like a Seinfeld reference. It's the opposite. So we said there'll be no speakers, no stages, no upsells, no vendors, no pitchmen. It's going to be 100 entrepreneurs, generous entrepreneurs, that are looking to connect with one another and spend time and brainstorm and mastermind on all these variety of topics, but they have freedom to go around and meet who they want to meet. It's what I always wanted. That's why or the program we create has everybody's name, everybody's information. Like you never see that at an event. You only see the speaker's information, but you never see the attendees' information. And what we do differently is we vet everybody. It's an application process. So, I don't want, just some Joe Schmo going. I want people that are good people I've talked to. So we vet it all. And then we did our first one in February and it was phenomenal. I kind of expected to fall on my face in the first one, but the feedback was phenomenal. And now we're sold out for next year and we just keep opening up blocks of 10. We have a couple more blocks to open up and we don't do any type of paid advertising or anything that people talk about. It's all done through, as the book, The Wealth of Connection, relationships.
But again, building your own door. Did the first one go smooth as you thought it was going to?
Yeah, it's funny because I can overthink this stuff. Like I don't want to say I can obsess on it. I wouldn't say overthinking, obsessing on it. Like obsessing on this and that and this and that. So we went through it all and we opened it up I think in April for ticket sales and it kept going and we kept planning it out and by July I'm like I keep waiting for when's it really going to get crazy? When's the other shoe going to drop? When's it going to kind of get really difficult? And then we get to almost the event I'm like, it hasn't happened yet. Like I'm waiting for it. So it's going to happen at the event. I'm going to, what are we missing? This is what I kept saying. What are we not seeing that I don't know yet? And I remember driving home from the venue Wednesday night being like, it never happened. That big shoe dropping never happened. I think because we cared so much and we spent so much time thinking about it that we found many of the problems that would have happened and addressed them beforehand. And it went phenomenal. I was kind of shocked because I thought this would be the test run, but we had one person that's really great guy, very successful. I told him, okay, we're going to change this. He goes, don't change too much. That's the only advice I can give you is don't change too much. I'm like, okay, all right. So yeah, so we're on to
One
the
of the
next one.
reasons that it was so successful, in my opinion, I didn't get to attend, but just from what I've heard and what you've shared, is because you built the connections first, and you made the people who were coming feel like they were an important part of the event, not just coming to your event.
Yes. Yes. That's the key. It's people felt included. They felt appreciated. They didn't feel, as somebody told me, like another number. They didn't feel like, and they didn't feel pitched, and they didn't feel like they had to sit through things they didn't want to sit through. Like we have a 2-foot policy at our event. Like if you don't like what you're in the conversation, you use your 2 feet and go to another conversation. Like there was so much freedom involved with it. And if you get tired, go to your room and take a little nap. Like we're making it where there's not the FOMO of like, oh, you got to keep going from speaker to speaker. So it was a new idea. It was something different, and obviously it hit home, and now it's really exciting planning the second one.
And I'm going to bring up something else that you're super proud of, and that I'm really impressed with. This is your family.
Yeah.
And what really anyone who follows you or who is a part of your world knows how valuable your family time is. But what's really cool to me is that you're teaching your kids at an early age how to be industrial and entrepreneurial themselves. Like the stories you talk about Dylan, who
Yeah.
will, I mean, your son will just tear anything apart and figure out how it works. And he's
Yeah.
how old?
Including things working in our home. Yeah.
Yeah, and how old is he?
He is going to be 14 in a couple of days.
Okay, so you shared something that he did at church with the electronics.
Yes.
Can you share that here?
Okay. So there were a couple things. I'm trying to think.
The dog that everyone got to see?
Dog that I'm,
He put it up on the he put it up on
oh
the
yes. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So he loves, I'll back up. Like he's always figuring out electronics. He's always going through it. So he figured out how to use a universal remote in different ways. I'm not sure what he did yet. Get codes, and he'll open up gates in communities because he's figuring out the codes. I'm like, Dylan, you got to be careful with this a little bit. He'll go to restaurants and all of a sudden he'll change the station from our table because he's got a remote that he's playing around with. So sometimes we're like, Dylan, you got to slow down, right? Because it could be a problem for the business. But what he did at church was he's got, I can't tell you what it was, AirPlay or what it was, but there's a login thing at the church where you have to log in and put your name in, and they have a picture from the church. Well, he went into it and hacked the system, whatever, and he loves our dog Coco, and he has a picture of and he put a picture of Coco in there. So every person at youth group that came into church that day, when they logged in, there was a picture of Coco there, and they're all kind of confused. But he had hacked into the system and made it to where they had to see her picture before they could log in. So silly things like that.
Are all three of your children as entrepreneurial? Because I see them working hard and doing their own thing. Are they all kind of entrepreneurial?
On different levels, like we told them from a young age, like my parents said to us, like, we're not giving you any money. We'll pay for your clothes and your food and your house, but if you want to buy things, this is what my dad told me. I was 10 years old. We're admiring a car commercial, and he got up, he turned the TV off, and he goes, "We are not buying you a car. So I'll let you know that." I was 10. We're not paying your insurance. I didn't even know what insurance was. But you're gonna work for it and you're gonna earn it. Okay. So I was delivering newspapers at 11, saving money, and and that's what we did. We bought our own stuff, and I value that so much because of how it helped me. So we did the same thing with our kids, and we're in a different financial spot than my parents were then, so it'd be a little bit easier to kind of not do that. But we're real adamant about this, and they all entrepreneurial. Some are way more than others, but they're all working. We have some that they're still they have to like we have one kid that has a amazing skill set, an amazing niche even, but he hasn't caught on to, my goodness, I can make more money in 2 hours doing this than I can working 40 hours in a job, right? And that's where he's at. And so it's kind of fun to watch because it's like we'll joke about it, like someday it's going to click and he's going to be like, wait a second, like I can do this. But here's the thing, I didn't value freedom until I had kids. I worked hard. I worked a lot. It wasn't until I had kids that I'm like, I don't want to trade all that time for money now. And I wish I would have put myself in a better position before we got there, right? Because the first couple of years when they were little, we really had to go. I think he's gonna have to figure this out. But I think we love introducing them to both. Have a job, build a business, see what fits for you. I know our middle son's gonna be much more inclined to freedom. Like it's just from our conversations. So it's just a fun journey to go on. But yeah, we're trying to, not brainwash them, but like I don't think most people get to see both sides. It's usually go to college, get a job, and then all of a sudden, a lot of them are 35 years old. Then they call me and they go, "I hate my job, and I want something where I have more freedom. I want a business," and that's when I start helping them. But now they're digging out because they have kids and they have a wife and they can't, or a spouse, and they can't devote the time like they could when they were 20, right? So that we're trying to avoid that trap with them, but it's a fun journey.
When you were growing up, other than the Matt story that you told, what was one of your most memorable parts of your own journey that really, to this day, you can see set you on the path that you've been on?
Wow, that's a tough question. At any point in my life or
Yeah.
childhood or
No, any point.
that's a I think you stunned me in that because I'm there were so many little things, but that story with Funzy was really, that was a game changer for me. But I okay, I and it's gonna go to the whole school story. And I told this in one of my books. When I was 16, like I was not good in school and I failed a lot of classes and I didn't try and I didn't care and I cared more about girls and hanging out with my friends than I did anything in class. But I remember distinctly going to the guidance counselor who was worried about me when I was 16, and I'm in this room and it's a dark room with no windows and those orange, university type lights, right? And it's just depressing. And she looks at me and says, "Well, what do you want to do with your life?" At 16. And my smart beep answer was, I don't want to wear a tie to work every day like this guy, which was her co-office partner in this like 2 by 6 room with no windows. So I don't want to go to work and wear a tie every day. And she said, "No, I'm serious." And I said, "No, I'm serious. Like I really don't want to do that." And she kicked me out of her office.
Mhm.
And she's like, "Get out." She was mad at me. And I couldn't understand. I knew why she was mad at me. I was sarcastic, but I really couldn't understand, like, I don't want to go down the traditional path. And even in that moment, I knew I will take less money. I don't need as much stuff, but I think in that moment I knew the freedom aspect of life was going to be more important to me than it was to other people. As other people are like, I'll go away to this college and have them tell me what to do and then go get a job. Like I would rather live off of bologna and baked beans in a closet and do what I want to do than have the traps of all these things society tells you need to do and then be trapped like that for the rest of my life. And I'll tell you, 4 years of floundering after high school and then finally finding photography. What happened was I didn't have any of that baggage. I didn't have a school to go to. I didn't have a house to pay for. I didn't have a car to pay for. I didn't have a debt. Owned my cheap car outright. Had a little bit of cash in the bank, and I got to live my dream. Whereas other people I know that would have liked to have done that, but I've already went to college and my parents wouldn't agree to that. I had no expectations. I had a clear slate. So I went all in and I became one of the best in the world at it because I was able to do that. So I really think that conversation with my guidance counselor, and I still can't remember her name. I wish I could remember her name. Um, that I still see her face, but that was a dividing point in my life in terms of this is what I believe in and I care about, and this is what I don't.
What was usually moments like that or thoughts like that come from seeing the world around us and never wanting to be that.
Yeah.
What was within your world that you just knew that suit and tie office wasn't for me? Like who represented that to you?
I'll tell you this: it wasn't necessarily the suit and tie as it was what happened to my dad. So right around the same time, probably 6 months earlier than that, my dad had his own business. Right. So here's the way I was raised: dad with his own business that struggled a lot trying to figure it out. Mom in a good government job. That's what I came home to every night. My dad trying to figure it out, and my mom coming home complaining about the office. And my dad saying, even when we were broke, quit the damn job almost every night at dinner, almost every night for my childhood. Quit the, like it was, but so I had a choice. Do I want to go the safe path and get a job that's, you're not going to get fired if you try to get fired in terms of a government job like that? Or my dad, who was always trying to figure it out. And my dad was, and I chose that. But what I saw was he had his own business, he had a partner, and they were doing pretty well. And then one day, um, I came downstairs for school, and he was laying face down on the couch, which I'd never seen him do. I went to school, I came back, and he was still there, just laying there. And then the next morning, my mom, with tears in her eyes, tells me that his business partner emptied out all the bank accounts, $134,000, 1985, 86. So it's a significant amount of money now, let alone then. All these construction jobs were not finished, hazmat, lawsuits, all. So for the next 2 years, our life was just a living hell. And I watched him go through all that, and he came out of it years later. And by 1994, paid off their house, was free. Like, so so my entire childhood was changed mid high school on because of that. Probably a reason why I didn't care about school a little bit as much. We were a little distracted, but at the same time, seeing what he went through, um, and how much we didn't have time together anymore, made freedom the number one thing that I searched for. As I had a family. And that's why when some people don't really care as much, oh, membership, this or that, recurring revenue, what it does is I'm going to leave this room as soon as we're done. I'm going to go play with my kid.
Mhm.
We're going to go in the pool. Like I've never missed that. So as this goes on, it's not sure. I love making money and I love freedom, but what I love more than anything is the fact that we've been together. And also, I don't do partnerships ever. because I saw it. Now I'm not saying they're inherently bad, but I'm not doing them.
Right.
And every time we've even tried it, it infringes on my creativity. So why bother? How about we create it without it? So that those experiences um shaped me permanently, for good or bad around it. But I'm so grateful for what we went through because it also made me better with my money. I think when other people are like other people, like my brother, for instance, rest his soul, he passed away last year. He was out of the house by the time it all happened. And he didn't see all the hell they went through. And he kind of had a very frivolous attitude towards money because I saw. And my mom was always says like you always saved, you always pay attention to it, even from like 15 because of that. So there's a lot of good that comes from the bad.
Absolutely. I think a lot of I'm actually writing a story right now about how the bad is what sets us up for the good if we actually look for it and use it for that advantage. Your dad was smart enough to tell you that, hey, you're good at photography, you enjoy it. What were you taking pictures of or doing that made him realize you were
I still wonder about that because I didn't have a camera. I had a point and shoot. And I think maybe I would go to games and I would bring my little point and shoot. And he kind of just it's just ironic that he said that because I don't know what he saw. He might have seen me playing around, but I never thought about it. I didn't even know it was a career. I never took pictures of any. I don't remember doing anything where I thought about it. My uncle was very much into it, so we played around a little bit. But how he saw that, I don't know. But there wasn't like this prodigy in waiting. When once I started doing it, I realized you need to bust it. I snuck in or bought cheap tickets to Yankees or Mets games 5 nights a week just to learn, and it took years. And I would meet it, but that was the thing. There, I used to sneak down to the photographer's pit and I would ask them questions every night. I would bring the photographers pictures and prints and I would ask them for that was like the first school that I actually liked was the photo box of Yankee Stadium because they were giving me critiques. And those were the people that I wound up getting my first internship with, which was so there's a lot of grit that went into it to get to that point.
but again, that goes back to how I introduced the segment. You didn't have a door, so you built a door. Like, not everyone says, "Oh, I snuck down to the press box at Yankee Stadium," like it's an everyday occurrence.
Yeah. It was well, the thing is with anything you do, you learn. And one of my favorite stories from it was, you know, I would go to the Yankee games in particular, and you always have to sit up top because I didn't have money for good seats. So I would go to the lower level, right? And this is where it really started figuring out. I go to the lower level, and what I did was I wasn't in the lowest part, but I'd watch the security guards. And I was like, well, they have a pattern to this. Like at the end of the inning, they walk down to the field, and then as soon as the inning starts, they come back up. And you watch that enough times and you go, all right. So I would literally bring my camera bag on my back. I would stand in the aisle. And as soon as they started walking down, I just followed right behind them. And about halfway down, I grabbed an empty seat. Then they would sit there and they would watch the crowd and then they come back up. And as soon as they passed me, I would shoot back in the aisle and I would finish it off and get down to the bottom. Within one inning, I was in the front row of every game. And from the front row, I could take better pictures and meet better people. So it wasn't given to me, but it took also going to a lot of games to even figure that. And then by then, and the other thing, I remember going to an Islander game, hockey game in New York, and I'd watch all these fans sneak by the glass to try to take pictures, and they would always get kicked out because they'd be wearing jerseys and hats on, and they were all excited. And I looked at the photographers, I'm like, they all look bored. They look like they don't even want to be here. So I watched, and then eventually I'd walk down and I would pull up a chair up to the glass. And I remember looking at the security guard. His name was Jeff. And I said, Jeff, another game. And he looked at me. He goes, another game. And that was it. So we were on first name base. I'm Vincent. Blah, blah. I didn't have a press pass. Every night, pull up a chair. Hey, Jeff, how you doing? Hey, Vince, how you doing? The entire season, I shot like a professional from the spot because I acted like I belonged there. Another game. So it's just observing that stuff.
I think you've said two. Well, you said a lot of important things, but two that really stick. A, observing observation of behavior and people around you, and
Mhm.
B, acting like you belong there. Like that's one
Mhm.
of the things I used to love about Emmett Smith was he would just score a touchdown and hand the ball back to the ref and run back to the huddle
Yep.
because he said you're supposed to act like you've been here before.
Yep.
Like, that's how you're going to be successful. Act like you've been here before.
Yep.
I'm gonna ask you two questions as we wrap this up. What is the Vincent of today? How is he different from the Vincent of 15 years ago?
Hmm. I am calmer and more patient, without a doubt. My the if somebody is listening to this and we haven't talked in 15 years, they'd be like, and we actually talked in person, they would say the same thing. He's not as much of a hothead. Every failed relationship that has happened in my life, friendship or otherwise, generally came from me overreacting to something, me being too charged up, me being too annoyed, me being too pissed off, and kind of just acting on that, as opposed to having a little more patience. I believe in patience and persistence. I had too much persistence, right? If you were going to measure that. So the patience and just the calmer, just realizing these things that I used to stress out about are not the end of the world, and they are rarely ever the end of the world. And it's lend itself in so many different ways where there's times I'll be kind of heated for a moment. And I'm like, just give it a little time and respond, like, as opposed to sending that text, right? It's funny because like I'll send voice memos to people. I don't really text anymore, and here's why. I have so many friendships or connections or relationships go sideways because of texting, because you can't understand tone in texting. And then all of a sudden, a really hard sounding message leads to another hard sounding message. And before you know it, you're verbally jabbing, and then something goes wrong. Whereas if we would have said it via voice, we would have laughed, we would have chuckled, we would have paused. And I'm like, we mess ourselves up. I think like your voice has almost a font to it,
Mhm.
right? Texting, we all have the same font. So I could say something sarcastic that I'm totally joking about, but it seems real. And people get like, so you just learn those things. I think that's the big difference. It's not that I'm any smarter or any more success, all that stuff. I think the understanding the patience and the surroundings around you have led to just life changing things.
And the last question that I ask all my guests: what does a warrior spirit or having a warrior spirit mean to Vincent?
I think it's that term, patience and persistence. I really think it's like that. That is the Mr. Miyagi of my world. Like it really came from when I first got my first when I worked for the Associated Press. When I was first starting my photography business, or my career, I was a freelancer. I was working at Newsday, but I really wanted to work at the AP in Manhattan. That's where when I did work for them, I wound up spending the day with the Dalai Lama, the Seinfeld cast, like anything in the AP is a big deal at that point if you shoot it. That's really what I wanted. So I got an introduction. I called Jonathan Elmer, the editor, and he set up an appointment for me, and then he canceled it. And then we set up again. He canceled again 8 times. 8 times I called. 8 times we set up. 8 times him or his assistant canceled. And then the ninth time, I got on the train and I got to Rockefeller Center and it didn't cancel. And I went up to his office with my big portfolio and I laid it down. And I'll never forget. He looked at me. I could still see him. He said, I want to thank you for your patience and persistence. And he said, without both, we wouldn't be here right now. And he opened up the portfolio and he gave me the job. And what I realized on the train home on the F train was if I had patience with no persistence, I never would have I would have waited. I wouldn't have called him again. The meeting never would have happened. If I would have had persistence without patience, I would have been like I was earlier in life a lot, where I was too ambitious, or I get pissed off because he didn't call me back and I get annoyed and I forget him. No. Patience to reach out once a week, and only once a week, but persistence to do it once a week. And that internship then catapulted me to everything else. So that I think that's like the yin and the yang that keeps me balanced.
I love that because I've done this for over 130 times now, and I ask that question each time, and that's the first time that answer has been given. So I appreciate the new look on the meaning of that to you, and I'm going to take it and use it into my own business and
Awesome.
my own life. Patience and persistence. My wife will be glad that I used the patience, but the
Yeah.
persistence,
Well, we're usually deficient on one of them,
yes,
you know,
patience is
and
mine.
yeah, and it's a good question. Like, which one are you deficient on? Like, some people it's patience, some people it's persistence. Like, yeah, I'll get there eventually, and I'll say to them, like, you're not going to live to 800 years old. Like, you got to get moving. You got to do something. Like, yeah, I'll get there eventually. Like, to have a good balance of it to where I don't get burnt out with too much persistence, and I don't get too complacent with too much patience.
Well, I appreciate you doing this interview with me today, and it's just an honor to know that people like you are still out in the world because
Oh,
we are both in a space where we know that there's a lot of charlatans and sharks, and it's nice to find the true ones that are actually interested in the connection before the business, and then the business happens because of the connection. So, just thank you for being a great person in this, darkened space.
I appreciate that, and yeah, we see a lot of it, right? And I appreciate you saying that, and just grateful for our friendship and honored to be on. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And if you'd like to connect with Vincent, his social platforms on Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, and Instagram, feel free to reach out. The addresses will all be at the bottom of the show notes. And once again, we just want to thank you for joining us on this edition of A Warrior Spirit. Be sure to like or subscribe so you catch all the episodes. We're now also on YouTube, but on Roku, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all the major platforms. And remember, the journey is sacred, the warrior's you. So remember, be inspired, be empowered, embrace the spirit of the warrior within.
It's not just about the fight, it's how we rise from it.